This is really a special day for all of us, as we know, as it is the Belcher Weir um, Women and Children's Pediatric Innovation Day. I am assuming since Mr. Belcher lives on the west side that we're probably he's probably waiting in traffic somewhere on either 90 or 480. But we're going to go ahead and get started. Our program is so lucky to have a sponsor like Mr. Belcher. He was a teacher and then an administrator in the Cleveland Public School District, and so has a love of children and a love for innovating how they learn and now how they're taken care of in pediatrics. So we thank him for his kind generosity and for his sponsorship of this day. So today we'll start out with our Grand Rounds lecture, and if anyone is available at noon, there will be lunch in the community room, and you can hear about a couple of the projects that we selected for our program this year. So when I met Dr. Chris for the first time, or at least I thought it was the first time, through some of the innovation sphere within Ohio, I kept thinking to myself, I know that guy. Like, what? Okay, but he's at Nationwide. I know that guy. And then I was thinking, well, maybe it's just because I'm really old. I'm thinking I know him. I'm having like a hallucination but no. Actually, we're so lucky that Corey is back today because he was actually a pediatric surgical resident here between 2010 and 2018, time away to Michigan, then back. And so I did know him because I'm sure at some point, I chastised him for the antibiotics that he ordered on some poor surgical patient or something like that. So we're delighted to welcome back one of our own. And I can say that we're really proud of the work that Corey has accomplished since he's left our institution. He went to a small college in Pennsylvania and then Ross Medical School, did some research here in the surgery department. And then, as I said, became a surgical resident here, did a fellowship up in Michigan, and is now an attending at Nationwide Children's Hospital. It's really very exciting in terms of just the breadth of the things that Corey is now doing. He's the director of the surgical care program, the co-director of the ECMO program. His clinical work, he does esophageal and thoracic, so he's kind of right from here. And he's also the founder and director of the Innovation Center at Nationwide Children's. And if any of you have ever been down to Nationwide, it's an amazing complex. And their research and innovation building is also pretty incredible. He's really trying to work on this internal mechanism that they have, and they have a whole team of biomedical engineers. So they're taking those ideas that they're getting from people and really driving that innovation forward, anywhere from, whatever they're doing at the bench to medical devices. The reason I got reconnected with Corey is that he is the principal investigator and chief operating officer of an almost $7 million grant from the FDA, in that they have 5 device consortiums around the country, and Corey leads the one that's in the Midwest. He also works with the Technology Innovation Prioritization Committee, a steering committee for value analysis, and a clinical pathways programs, as well as doing surgical outcomes research at Nationwide. So he's going to share with us his journey and help us understand how we at Rainbow can partner with our friends down at Nationwide and how we can really try to make the lives of our children better. Corey, come on up.
Thank you, Claudia. Thanks for that introduction. I appreciate everybody coming out. we were joking where we were trying to get all the PowerPoint slides loaded up, and we're like, we only have 10 minutes. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I could see like 5 patients in that amount of time. Like that's so much time, like 2 minutes per patient. Anyway, it's how we think. So thank you so much for having me today. It's been I've been an attending now for about 3 years at Nationwide Children's. Have obviously fond memories here on the obviously ped side, but on the adult side. So it's good to be back. But I want to dive in to the talk today because I think it's important, as I've learned in this unique role that crosses industry, hospital, academia, and the government. Where does healthcare sit in all of that? And I think that one of the challenges that we don't appreciate, by we, I mean the hospitals, is how important we are in this cycle and how we really should take advantage of that and how much value we provide. So where does innovation come from? Comes from industry. There's some quotes here of, industry puts forth $161 billion. Academia puts forth $16 billion. Government puts forth $61 billion. A lot of money goes into this word innovation, which I want to talk a little bit about how to define that because it's a very buzzy word. And I want to talk a little bit about how to define it and the way that we've defined it. But there is a huge important aspect to this cycle and who's contributing to value. And healthcare is really where everything starts and ends. So in the hospital is where innovation starts and honestly where it ends. And what I want to tell all of you is that this is you. So, the ideas start here. They go out, they do a startup, they become a startup, they're making money. But guess what? Then they have to get back into the clinical setting. They have to make it through clinicians, value analysis, they have to get paid for it. So there's all these challenges, but ultimately the clinicians and people within the hospital system are really the most important aspect to this whole cycle. So let's talk about how can we innovate in healthcare. It has to be structured and it has to be intentional and it has to be directed and supported by leadership. So I put this sort of simple graphic together because we use the word innovation a lot. And the way I like to think about it is that you've got the hospital, and the hospital really wants to take its ideas to get out of the hospital, to be commercialized, to be licensed, to be used in patients, not only here, but elsewhere. That's how you can generate royalties. That's how you generate licensing, et cetera. But ultimately, that's how you can get your ideas bigger than the hospital outside to other institutions. You do a startup or you license it, that goes into industry and the med tech. But what's interesting is that now you've got this unique scenario where there's a startup, they're making a product or producing a software, and then they have to get it back into the hospital as a buyer. So they have to get stakeholders, they have to find a way back in it, they have to get people to pay for it. So interestingly, that whole process and that cycle is very important. And so I want to focus on that and how that we've structured that a little bit at Nationwide on the way that we like to think about it. So first, I want to start with healthcare. So the first thing is, how do you develop a mechanism within the hospital that supports ideas to be commercialized? Commercialized means to be out into industry, making money, not only making money, but helping patients and actually people using it. But the word commercialized means that. So the way that we did this is 3 years ago, I started the Innovation Center at Nationwide Children's. If you have 2 hours of your time, I can tell you how long it took for me to get a name for a center at a large institution. And it was like 3 committees, and they had to think about the word innovation a lot and what does a center mean. Anyway, I can talk about that. It's a big thing. So I was like, it's my thing. I could just name it whatever I want, right? They're like, no. So anyway, so the mission that we put forth is to create, support, and educate. I want to talk a little bit about how we did that. That was the mission of the Innovation Center. Innovation Center is really focused on internal ideas within Nationwide Children's, driving pipeline and increasing the number of ideas to get to commercialization. So here's the team we put together, and it's very important to have a very multidisciplinary team. I'm going to talk a little bit about the core team who makes up the core individuals of the Innovation Center, but then around it is sort of what you need infrastructure-wise to have your internal center successful. You need Clinical champions. Those just aren't physicians. They're nurses, they're respiratory therapists, they're managers, they're value analysis committee members, they're, you know, anybody in the hospital that may be using something or giving feedback on it. You have to have those individuals on your team or at an arm's length. You need a good regulatory person. Regulatory means getting it through the FDA to be used in the world. You need developers. You need someone that's going to be able to do some basic, I'll say, prototyping or testing. And if you don't have that, you can outsource it. There's a lot of ways to do that, and it can be relatively cheap. You need a good IRB because you're going to do some studies internally. The most important one, the reason I put it at the top, is that you need a very collaborative, and by need, I mean it's very important for the success of the Innovation Center, to have a collaborative tech transfer office. Tech transfer is just that, technology being transferred out into the world. And so they are really, really focused on taking ideas and nurturing them to a point that makes sense. You don't want a tech transfer office that you feel like you don't want to give them your ideas because they're going to steal them, right? There needs to be a good collaborative approach. And the way that we took that is the head of tech transfer and myself, we are aligned in mission. We have the same goals, but we have different deliverables. And I don't want to get too much into the details about that. But value analysis, does anybody know what value analysis committee is? It's this weird thing that nobody ever talks about. Essentially, you can make the greatest technology in the world. You're like, I got a thing. It's going to be awesome. It's going to save everybody. But there is a committee that when you're out in a startup, you go to the hospital and say, I want your hospital to stock this. And just because it's a great device doesn't mean they're going to be like, sounds good. There's costs, there's group purchasing organizations where it's like, we bought 1,000 of these, so we've stocked them. So very challenging things. So getting them involved early is important. And then we created this advisor and resident group, which is pretty much a group of entrepreneurs out in the world that have agreed to give their time free to just give feedback on ideas. So this is sort of how we structured our team. Here's the team right now. We have an operations manager, and this is all grown as part of my initial when I came there. Operations manager, we have a project engineer, education coordinator, we have an industry relations person, which I'll talk about later why he's that. And then we have a fellowship program. Those are 4 full biomedical engineers. They're not in school, they've actually finished school, at least undergrad. They're either in their master's program, some are postdocs, and some are full-fledged biomedical engineers. And so they do a 1-year fellowship, which was what I did at Michigan, I'm not an engineer, where they do what's called needs assessment and opportunities finding. So they are part of the first thing, which is create. So this is a fun graphic. And I think one of the most important things that I learned as how to innovate within a hospital system is that you obviously have to have a mechanism that supports ideas when they come to you. But you also have to have an outreach pipeline generation mechanism, which actually goes out into the hospital and finds new ideas. So that's what we do. The fellows essentially get embedded in the hospital. We identify focus areas, hematology, cardiology, orthopedic surgery, and they spend weeks with those departments, not just the physicians, but everybody in clinic talking to patients. They generate all these ideas, and then we screen them. And the hope is at the end of the year, they've selected one of those. And so this is really based off of if anybody just Googles the biodesign process. And it was a concept that was generated in the 90s, which essentially said you can intentionally innovate yourself by going out and finding problems. And so that's what we do. It's very important for pipeline generation. And so we've been able to do, and I can't share those ideas currently, but we've been able to do that in a fair amount of areas, not just surgery, orthopedic surgery, obviously ENT, cardiology, a lot in neonatology, actually a lot in dentistry. Nationwide has a huge dentistry program. Trauma, obviously as well, not just in trauma surgery, but in the process of trauma, reunification and mass casualty, burn garments, these types of things. So it's been really good as we've taken what started in surgery and so said, let's just make this hospital wide. And so that's how you you're creating new things. You need a mechanism for pipeline, meaning generating new ideas. But then if someone comes to you, you have to have a way to support it and find a way to what we call de-risk it, which is make it closer to that point of commercialization or not expend resources that are wasteful. So we do two things. We do a sprint, which is where we assess a product. We do something, we have some basic prototyping, or we do an IRB, or what's called customer discovery. And then we actually just launched something new, which is called the Innovation Bootcamp. So I'll talk about that in a second. So that's our support. And then we educate. Part of our mission to the institution as value is, hey, look, we're also going to educate the institution on entrepreneurship that says, if I have an idea, how am I going to take it there? And that's just not clinicians. That's also researchers. That's administrators too. So we have a monthly innovator forum where people come to their ideas, but then we are actually just finishing our first entrepreneurship bootcamp series. And so, sorry, the font's a little bit messed up from the transfer, but this was the intention for this is let's do something that is a focused time that instead of the idea generators, the clinicians, researchers going somewhere and doing this boot camp, which is normally what happens, let's bring it to them. And so it's every 2 weeks. It's an hour and a half. There's a free educational session where we have a guest speaker talk about these topics, which is value proposition, stakeholder, economics, regulatory, intellectual property. These words might not mean anything to you, but they're very important to evaluating your idea to see if it's primed to keep moving forward. And we do a free education series, and then we do a boot camp where we've identified 8 products that are assigned to a team and a fellow, and they go to a pitch competition at the end of it. And the hope is that once we identify those projects, we can provide support and they can be more primed to getting internal funding or external funding, and they put a pitch together. This is something that's been done at a lot of places. You'll hear about it, bench to bedside and all these type of sort of mechanisms that we call accelerators. Ours, we tried to make it unique in that we brought the boot camp to the clinicians and providers so that they wouldn't have to leave, and it helped with their time. And so it was over lunch. So that was important. Here's some of and we made it virtual. The last one is in person. So, we had about 50 to 60 people come to the public sessions, and then obviously 8 people with their teams for the other session. So that's part of where this mission towards focusing on how do you develop an internal mechanism within the hospital that finds new ideas, supports inventors that are already here, and then provides education to the entire healthcare system in this sector. And so, the Innovation Center now is growing. We're on the strategic plan, and if any of you know this, like, you don't get anything if you're not on a strategic plan. And so, anyway, it's growing out to probably 10 fellows by 2030 and about 4 to 5 FTEs. And I do want to make a comment, which is, if you're thinking about developing something like this, let me know, because it's very, very important for you not to make promises on royalties and deliverables that in this area are 5 to 10 years down the road. The deliverables are you're improving innovation culture, which means as you embed fellows, there's this concept where people are like, oh, now I have somewhere I can take my ideas to. You have a structure that actually, if someone has an idea, and most people that have ideas in the hospital are like, where do I go? And they end up burning a lot of their money or their own cash on the outside. And so you're making it internally, and then an educational forum where people can come and learn about it. So that's how we've structured it here. The plan is to grow it, but that's the internal structure. Now I want to talk about, okay, you have created your internal mechanism. It's great. It's going great. You have developed a way so that products leave the institution and they're out in the world and they're startups. So now, how do you bring those ideas back into the hospital system? So I just talked about bringing them out, but now I want to talk about how to bring them back into the hospital system. And so Let's talk about that. So I have some statistics here just to show you the challenges related to that. And so about 0.6% of all of the seed round funding, which is a venture capital fund, venture capital, which is how startups get funding, was dedicated towards pediatric only startups. That's very low. Pediatric startups make 1% of all the startups. About all of the venture capital funding that goes into venture capital, only 1.5% of it is actually dedicated towards peds, and less than 0.1 to 0.3% of pediatric companies get an exit, which is when they sell the company or have an acquisition of greater than $1 million. So you're like, wow, why should I even do it? These are good questions, but let me challenge you, and I want to entice you of the mechanisms to do that and why it's important, because if we don't do it, nobody else will. So as I said, pediatric startups are undercapitalized. I said that. Capitalized meaning funding. The incentives are smaller and fewer, right? There's less patients. I'll talk a little bit about that because the orphan drug organization and the way you do rare diseases has found a way around that, because those companies make a lot of money and there's not a lot of patients. Adult market enables funding, meaning that most of the time, if there's an adult company with a pediatric device, the pediatric device is the first one to get cut. So we really want to push pediatric focused companies or pediatric devices. And once again, success is hard. So pediatric innovation and sort of as I was thinking about this, the catalyzing innovation is not fail for lack of ideas. There's plenty of ideas out there. The issue is that those ideas have been doomed to fail because they're put into a structure that's focused on the adult market and focused on other areas. So how do we get around that? So what I'm going to talk about is the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium, which is the FDA funding grant. And this isn't the only way to do that, but this is one way that you say, how do you take this gap in funding that pediatric companies and startups have and bridge that to where they can get more money or they can get back into the hospital? And the focus is, the way to do that is to actually do work for them cheap and get them back into the hospital easier. So what's this mechanism to get things back into the hospital? That's the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium. And I can talk a little bit about how we've structured that. So the MPDC, as Claudia said, this was, it's fortunate that we got this. It's a $7 million FDA funded grant. It's about $1.2 million of operations a year. So myself and David Ekman are the PIs. And then the way that we structured it was essentially a business. We have an executive board, we have directors, and then there's representation across multiple institutions in all of the areas of med device. We have a director of clinical trials, we have a director of engineering, et cetera. And we've also integrated fully with the Ohio economic development. So we have Ohio Life Sciences and we have venture capital on it. So there's about 15 people that are under this where we pay a certain amount of money to contribute to it. And you can probably see some familiar faces here. So this is a huge mechanism. We look at this as its own startup and its own company. So the MPDC is a reviewer, evaluator, and funder. So to date, we're only in year 3. We've already reviewed about 200 individual companies or ideas. We've met with over 100 pediatric startup companies in various areas. And we've developed an advisor network of about 130 people across the state. So thinking about this almost like as that first slide where I have those circles that are getting bigger, it's the same thing, only just, on steroids for the MPDC. You have a core team, you have partners, and then you have this giant advisor network that can weigh in. So sort of structure the same. We've already given around about $500,000 in funding. The FDA requires us to give a certain amount. We've been able to double that amount through an investment from NCH to be able to give that. So now we're probably about $750,000. So the thing that I want to make sure that I get across also is the MPDC is a operational mechanism that evaluates companies and evaluates ideas wherever they come from. So across the country. So you can see this is where most of the ideas have come from. There is a lot, obviously, in the Midwest, but actually a lot of them are on the East and West Coast. So 90% of the companies that we funded through the MPDC are actually not in the state of Ohio. They're all across the country. And so what we see the MPDC as is a external mechanism that brings expertise to the table that can help weigh in on a company, but then, if need be, can bring that company into their institution to do that clinical work, which is that arrow back into the institution. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've been able to do so far. And so we provided 15 regulatory guidance. We've done 10 engineering protocols. We've helped with 15 clinical trial companies, about 40 to 50 business development. Reimbursement is a name that you're just like, how do I get paid for my product? So we've been able to do that. We've developed a new proprietary matchmaking software. I'm not going to do a demo here. I want to give everybody a word of advice. Never demo in front of a crowd. It always fails. Okay. So screenshots work best. Meet me afterwards for the demo. Never demo. It works 50% of the time. And if it doesn't, so I've learned that the hard way. And so we have, if you could think about the MPDC as a matchmaker between startup to supplier or vendor. So we have about 150 now vendors across the state and Midwest that say, hey, I can build your prototype. So now we have a startup, someone build the prototype. We have a matchmaking software that can do that. And then we have a funding mechanism to do that. And all this is focused on how do we make it easier for the company to get to the next step because of this big challenge that venture capital or whoever doesn't want to invest in them because everything's expensive. So this is a way for us to maximize our impact. Oh, it almost went through the demo. It actually worked. So once again, we've funded 30 companies, 2 clinical trials. An SBIR grant is essentially a small business grant that companies get to get research in the institution. 3 FDA approvals. We gave out $500,000 last year. We're planning on doing another $500,000 to 50 companies this year. This didn't go over, but we have also had 3 annual showcase events. So it's very important to bring everybody together. We had a launch party with then the Lieutenant Governor, and then we had our first showcase in Columbus. This was at OSU, on OSU's campus, which was great. We had about 150 people come. And I want to make sure, I was thinking about this talk and I want to make sure that I also talk about like, what do you fund? You're like, okay, Corey, give me a few examples of what you fund. And so I just put this up here. This was the recipients of our 2024, and you can go to our website, pedsinnovation.org. It's very pretty, a lot of great colors. Took a lot of time thinking about that, but you can see all the companies we've supported. You can click on them, go to their link, and there's some pretty cool stuff that you can see. But we fund any project in the pediatric space, any company that is focused on peds and has the best proposal. So Gravitas Medical is an NG tube device. Eclipse Regenesis is a small bowel or a short gut bowel extender. Esperto Medical is a non-invasive cardiac monitor for babies. Opalgenics is a software as a medical device company for opioid. HeartPoint Global is a cardiac stent. And so we span everything, any specialty in peds, which is a really interesting glimpse. And so what the other thing the PDC does is it gives us a glimpse into pretty much every technology in the country in the pediatric space. So we have access to them, we can see them, we can see if they match make into our institution. We did another showcase actually here in Cleveland. What was in July? Oh yeah, list is there, July. This one we focused on software as a medical device, AI, cybersecurity, and we funded 6 software as a medical device companies. It was really fun. The theme was Pac-Man. It was a great discussion. It's a full day. The next one will be in Cincinnati, and then the last one will be back in Columbus on Nationwide next year, which I'll talk about that later too. So one of the other things we've done, we did a webinar series. Feel free to go to our YouTube channel if you want to look at something on a drive. Essentially, we said, hey, let's a commitment to once again, educate. So thinking about almost those same missions from the Innovation Center, just on steroids and scaled. So we partner with a group called Project MedTech that has they have a podcast that has about 10,000 followers, and we partner with them to do this webinar series. And we finished actually recently. Please feel free to go check it out. That was fun. I do want to put up to highlight our website. We're very proud of it. It's very pretty. You can see the colors are pretty. We had to get FAA clearance for the drone footage here that we had to do, which was an interesting thing too, to generate this video. I can talk to you about that as well. It's been great building things and being able to show. And if you want to go to pedsinnovation.org, you can highlight you can see some of the companies we've supported just to see. So once again, the PDC, if you can think about it on the outside, bringing things in, we do de-risking, which is we help companies do things for cheaper. Because this is an FDA grant, we don't ask anything in return. Essentially, it's free service. We have this deal flow database. We have a registry. We try to get them access back into the hospital. I want to talk a little bit about economic development, and then we're driving partnerships, which, one of the reasons why we're here today, talking about what does the MPDC look like in the future in expansion, and what does that look like. So once again, MPDC. So these were our strategic initiatives of 2025. And I talked a little bit about them, but we're likely going to do a similar for 2026. But, it's been great. We've learned a lot. So two partnerships I want to talk about. That's one being, I think, important for here. One is called the Action Network, which is a Cincinnati group that focuses on cardiac devices, which is a clinical trials. As I said, one of our focuses, 70% of the companies with our 200 companies need help getting back into the hospital. They need clinicians to be on their IRBs. They need sites. They need any type of clinical evaluation and feasibility. So we're focused on bringing them back in to the hospital. And this is one of the mechanisms for that. And then Solutions for Patient Safety, which I don't know if you all are familiar, but it's a pretty large, I think 155 hospital organization that is focused on QI major problems within many hospitals. And so we partnered with them now about 7 months ago. And essentially they came to us and said, hey, look, we have all of these problems that we're solving with these QI initiatives. Are there devices in the world that we can actually implement to help solve these problems? We've got a list of problems. We have how much they cost, but can you help us identify potential solutions for that? So it's been a great partnership. We have a steering committee. We're going to be publishing a solutions report likely by the end of the year where we have companies aligned with the problems that they have put forth. We're going to do a joint publication in 2026. And then in 2027, where it's back in Columbus, we're tentatively planning on doing a large symposium with SPS, likely having a journal come to sponsor it, and then really focusing on, hey, look, let's shoot for the stars. Let's find some really big problems or big solutions that can solve these problems. So, future plans of sort of where everything's at, as I was thinking about this talk, and that's where I wanted to separate the two initiatives, Innovation Center, MPDC. The other important distinction I want to make about the MPDC is that the MPDC is not an innovation center. The MPDC is a way to get involved in startups across the country and to potentially bring those back into the hospital and do some shared learning across the consortium. But ultimately, the MPDC cannot be your innovation center. It's very separate. MPDC is focused on startups, LLCs. They have to be incorporated to really drive innovation. While they are related, the most important thing to a healthcare system is creating your own infrastructure and mechanism that can actually get to the point of an MPDC funding. So future plans, sorry, a little bit crooked on the third one. Expanding partnerships. We are working on expansion. Right now, we're working on a proposal with the state to essentially say, can the MPDC be a statewide pediatric center of excellence, which could be a statewide innovation center that expands the scope of the PDC outside of just to companies, but to actually institutions that want to put their ideas forward. Work is on refundability, obviously always 3 years away, and then sustainability, as I said, is very important to us. And so, once again, just to rehash what I said before, where the MPDC has really seen value is a group of individuals and investigators and expertise weighing in on devices, and we've created a platform that can evaluate them. The hope to bring some of those back into the hospitals to increase research, to increase dollars to the hospitals. But ultimately, to do innovation within an institution, you need leadership support, you need startup funding, you need infrastructure, you need a collaborative tech transfer office, you need some type of early seed funding. It doesn't have to be $1 million. It's $10,000 here, $15,000 here to say, we're going to do a prototype and then we're going to test it. And sometimes that fails. And then obviously mission-driven deliverables, which is really about separating the deliverables that your tech transfer office, which they're focused on royalties and licensing, with what you're trying to build. It needs to be collaborative, but building culture, building education, creating a fellowship, which also has value because I've integrated with OSU, Ohio State. And so, there's opportunities here with CASE to do a fellowship where they would love to come here and spend a year in the hospital and learning about things. So there's opportunities there for education, cheap. And so that's my thoughts. I'm happy to talk more about it and answer any questions. And then to claim your credit for today's lecture, please use code 77609.
Corey, it's fabulous to have you back. And it was just really great to hear about how Nationwide has taken your idea of an innovation center and really blown it up. It's really incredible. And we're so happy that you're here to share it with us. So I think that that's probably a great way for all of you to think about, well, how does this happen at UH? And that's part of the point of this day, is so that people can understand how these things are done at other places. But we also want you to understand how you can do these things here. Because we're a children's hospital within a health system, as Corey has all these people specifically at Nationwide, we're fortunate enough that here we have a ventures team who does exactly all of those things that the Innovation Center there does. And this day is our conduit to taking the ideas that our people have at Rainbow and moving those ideas into that ecosystem within the ventures, and then going through all of those steps. So in terms of our innovation program, from the Rainbow side, it's really just me. And we get our ideas on Belcher Weir. Other times people come up to me during the year. Through the years that we've had our innovation day, we've actually evaluated about 300 different ideas and have moved several of those forward to licensing and startups over the years. But the history of innovation at Rainbow is really pretty incredible. If you think about things like the HEPLOC, that was actually invented here. If you think about patient and family-centered care, that was invented here. So we don't only look at medical devices, but we also create programs that are different, things like AYA, those types of things. We go across the spectrum, not only of medical devices, but also programming and other ideas within medicine. So again, just so thankful to you, Corey, to highlight how different places do it and how we can take ideas, that idea about a fellowship, those are things that we really want to bring. So for you to be able to share those with us is just so incredible. And we have Kendra here from Ventures, so I just want to let her explain a little bit about what she does. And then if anyone has questions for Corey.
Thank you, Claudia. Corey, it's good to see you again.
So,
I'm glad that I could be here, but it's always fun to kind of listen what like Nationwide's doing. And we're starting to work much more closely with the Nationwide team too. So we've had an opportunity recently to sit down and try to understand more about what they're doing. But I'm curious by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of UH Ventures? Some of you. How many of you know that within UH Ventures is a tech transfer office? That's what I thought. So about a year ago, I took over that responsibility within UH Ventures. So UH Ventures does a lot of things. But the thing that hit my heart the hardest a couple years ago when I was sitting with one of our vice chairs of research was that I asked him why I hadn't seen him come through Ventures. And he's like, why would I? You guys just care about investing. And I was like, oh boy, we've got a marketing problem. A little fun fact about tech transfer. It is a federally required office within an institution when you have federal dollars coming into your institution to advance research. So we exist not only to help advance that research from coming from research that turns into innovation, that I found something that has value that I can lock, some intellectual property or some protection around and try to get that into clinical practice. But we exist to support innovators who are also working at the bedside, who are identifying those problems that really warrant that effort to dig into that. And so I have a team of two, like Claudia. We were a scrappy team of two that sit within that office. And what we've been doing with Claudia over the years that I've been here about 4 years, is trying to make sure that we can think differently, right? So I come from venture capital. I come from economic development. That was my background. And that model really is a disservice, I think, to pediatric. And so it's going to require a lot of us thinking differently about how do we get these innovations from inside of a hospital. And I just want to be really clear about what Corey was presenting. These innovations are like tiny little babies. Like we've got to get them. It's like a NICU, and then you got to get that little that baby that's kind of sticky, like its skin has to start to really kind of fortify. But then we got to get them toddling, and then eventually we try to get them to the point that we can find a partner that we can license them to once, or get them out of the hospital into the hands of somebody that can wrap a company around it. And that's when they become viable to the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium. And so I just want to invite you all to engage with our office if you haven't yet. I also want to make sure that as you see the presentations today that Claudia and I, we sat and reviewed every single submission. Some of these ideas we've funded because we want to plant seeds, but they don't necessarily have that pathway to, like, they're going to launch and they're going to become a company, but they will make meaningful impact. There are others of you that may have submitted that you may have gotten an email from me saying, I can't wait to learn more, because we're going to put you through very, very rigorous, like, understanding the market and understanding the competition and understanding the opportunity and what kind of resources can we bring to bear. But I just want to manage your expectations that sometimes we find that, that's not the best idea yet. It will be the next one you come up with. And I was talking to Dr. Ponsky. Hopefully you all know Dr. Ponsky. His father actually invented the Ponsky tube that is used probably every day in your practice. And we were talking about all the ideas he's had over the years. And it's hard when you're told your idea isn't going to make it, right? But it takes that constant turn and that constant attempt to really kind of find that. But within our office, we partner a lot. We're a small team. We have outsourced partners. We have a lot of vendors who support us. And we have money under management to help us prototype. So what Corey mentioned, we have gap funds. We can deploy 10, 15,000 up to $200,000 into ideas based on those funding mechanisms. So I just wanted to make sure you know who I am. I work at CMC. I'm here 3 days a week. I kind of float around the system because I do like to meet people in person. I like to be out. I like to see the action. So if you ever want to invite me up to kind of shadow you for a day, I welcome that. I like to get proximate to what's actually happening. And so it's just nice to meet you. And I wanted to thank Claudia for inviting me today to make sure that, you understand that you have people here that can support you too. We haven't quite cracked the code on everything that Nationwide's doing, but I love coming and listening to those models so that we can be inspired to start to think about what is that next journey for us. So anyways, thanks for being here and thanks for having me.
Does anyone have, all right, let's do it.
Corey, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it, and welcome back. A couple of questions. So how is the consortium actually evaluating these companies? How do you choose who you're going to support and who you're not going to support? And then when you are supporting them, is the consortium actually taking an equity stake in companies? And I guess a third question was, where do you see this in 10 years?
Yeah.
Like, what's your grand vision?
Those are great questions. And, you know, the second I got the grant, I was like, how do I get refunded and how do I make it sustainable? So, you know, they're like, why are you thinking about that already? I'm like, you got to always be thinking about sustainability. So, answer your first question. So we developed, so every PDC has had their own way to evaluate a company. There's not a definitive way. What we did was we sort of inputted some of the data from the other PDCs, but then used some metrics from venture capital and business leads and generated our own scoring system where there are 130 advisors. They're separated into 5 domains. Those domains are healthcare, business, regulatory, IP. Every submission gets evaluated by all those domains, generates a score. You know, it's weighted differently about unmet need. We have a pre-screening, which we had 110 apply. Then we have a full application, which is 25%, 30 of them. And then at the end, usually we select 8 to 10 that are going to receive the awards. So to answer your question, there is a structured, standardized assessment that we take into each company. That was something we wanted to do better than what's been done before, because a lot of times traditionally it was like 4 or 5 people in the back room sort of just selecting who was going to get funded. And so we said, let's make it data driven. Now the other thing that's unique about what we try to do is, I had this interesting question that someone asked me, because early on we're like, oh, we got this great, you know, intake, and we're going to spit all this data, and then we're going to have access to the advisors. And so the people reviewing are the internal members of the PDC. So those people I showed, but actually most of them are the 130 advisors who just say, hey, yeah, we want to see what's out there and we're going to weigh in on it. I'm an IP lawyer. I'm going to weigh in on it. So that's actually the most important part about our PDC, is it's not just internal, it's actually external people evaluating. But somebody was like, what are you going to do with the 91 other companies that you say no to? And I was like, fine, we're going to meet with all of them. So we said, okay, if you don't get funding, we meet with you, we give you an assessment, we evaluate you. And so that's why we met with over 100 companies, because we don't say no. So that's something unique that we do. And because we are a service to pediatric innovation, and I want to make sure that we're giving it all we got. The second thing you have is no, we don't take any equity. Now, I've learned a lot about this recently. And so technically the FDA mandates that you use $300,000 a year towards what's called direct device funding. There's no indirects. It's directly to the company. There's no strings attached. It's non-dilutive funding, which means there's no equity. Now, that's not to say that, which is sort of going into your next question, that's not to say that once you've built an evaluation tool and mechanism, that you can't have a separate body that then takes equity into those companies ad hoc to drive them forward, now that you've got this dense review and we call due diligence. So that is sort of the 10-year plan, as how do you create a sustainable model that can funnel into the, I'll say, free work of the MPDC. It's an equity-based investment model. And so it gets a little tricky when you talk about nonprofit versus profit organizations, which I've learned a lot about recently. But so the 10-year plan, where I'm at right now is I'm actually putting a proposal together with Jobs Ohio in the state that says, hey, look, we are essentially very similar to your Ohio Third Frontiers and your ESPs, which are the entrepreneur service providers, which we have a evaluation process. We spit out data and we have a group of people that can help you. And the plan is to put together a pediatric center of excellence that has investors from the state, from institutions, industry, that can create a mechanism that is sustainable outside of the grant. So my focus in the next 3 years is to get funded for the PDC as an entity, regardless of FDA funding.
And that's probably a good idea because the PDCs have actually been around for about 15 years. But it's not always sustainable. I think there's only one PDC that has been funded for the entire time. We actually were part of a PDC in the Northeast, probably about 10 years ago. But that PDC eventually did not get refunded. So I think that's probably your best bet, is to make it sustainable outside, especially in light of things that are going on in terms of government funding right now, because it often changes. There have probably been there's only 5 every 5 years, but the players have changed on
there's a lot of
multiple
turnover.
occasions. So people will get funded for 5 years, and then the FDA chooses a different center, and all is lost. So that's really a good thing. To kind of model it after the third frontier.
Yep.
We've at Rainbow, we have had projects that have gone through the third frontier, and have moved devices forward, have moved software as a medical device forward, with some of the companies that we've spun out. So I think that's going to be a really great way to make sure that this is sustainable.
Yeah, and that's one of the other reasons why we've been very intentional about not making it tied to the innovation center sustainability. 2 separate models. Like my innovation center strat plan, business plan is happening regardless of the PDC. And so the PDC is going to function regardless of where it's at. Our focus is to make it essentially a platform that has input from multiple hospitals. So my hope is to expand it to other hospitals that can all contribute, with some industry and statewide support to make it outside of the FDA funding something sustainable.
Yeah.
Good questions.
All right. Well, we'll give you all 5 minutes back. We know that you are all taking care of the interns' work today. So thank you. Come on back down to the community room at noon. There'll be lunch, and we'll hear from the smaller, because the innovation grant for Belcher Weir is only $2,500. The projects are smaller, but as Kendra said, we evaluate all the projects and have some other things that we will be moving forward from the ideas that we got this week. So have a great morning, and we'll see you at noon.
Thank you.